Hi, I'm Sasquatch. I shall be taken out and murdered, my genitals torn off and pulled apart by horses, my limbs exhibited in a neighboring town. Nigel Hawthorne as King George III. Yeah, I think I did that pretty well. This button.
Atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where the scullery wenches remain on strike, and regrettably, this month's ration of salt pork will not be going out as scheduled. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the Blast Radius. Delighted to have you with us tonight. Coming up on the Worst People in the Whole Wide World Weekly Update. The October domestic box office hits a new record low, and Hollywood still can't figure out it's because they keep making god-awful dog shit movies. Two crazed knife-wielding attackers wound a dozen people on a British train, but it's okay because the cops assure us it totally wasn't a terrorist attack. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, Drew to his friends, tries to acclimate himself to life as a common man. Is it just me, or does this freaking monologue get more Anglo-centric each time? But first and most importantly, Kim Kardashian has cracked the case, ladies and gentlemen. She has seen the dastardly conspiratorial cover-up for what it really is, and she has officially come out as an Apollo denier. On Thursday's episode of The Kardashians, which is apparently a reality series airing on Hulu. I mean, really? It's the year 2000 goddamn 25 and people are still watching this family on television? The legendarily galaxy-brained Ms. Kardashian boldly declared that because Buzz Aldrin is a man in his 90s who sometimes slurs his words in interviews, that means the Apollo 11 moon landing never happened. At least that's her rationale, as near as I understand it. And you folks know how this exercise works. Some low information ignoramus sees a very persuasive YouTube video and they are immediately convinced that the moon landing never took place. But they are such low information ignoramuses, so intellectually crippled by their own lack of knowledge and understanding, that they refer to it in the singular as the moon landing, because they clearly are so stupid they think there was only one. So let's grant Ms. Kardashian her central premise just for shits and giggles, just as a fun rhetorical exercise. Okay, so the 1969 Apollo 11 landing was somehow faked. But what about all the other lunar missions? What about the 5 other lunar landings? Was it only Apollo 11 that was a fake? Did we send Apollo 8 on a real lunar circumnavigation and Apollo 10 on a real lunar landing dress rehearsal just to throw people off the scent of the fact that number 11 was going to be fictional? The reason I ask is because either way, no matter what your answer is, Your theory is already well and truly fucked, sweetheart. If it's yes, then why did we build a launch vehicle and a spacecraft that were capable of flying men to the moon and delivering them into lunar orbit if we were just going to fake the actual landing? If it's no, then why did we go to all the trouble of faking 9 manned lunar flights, 6 successful landings, and 1 failed landing? I mean, what? We faked the successful failure of Apollo 13 just to throw people off the track of the conspiracy, just to make it more believable? And how do we reckon with the fact that every second of the mission audio for all 9 manned lunar landing flights exists and is available for public consumption? Did the astronauts record the fake mission audio while they were in low Earth orbit? Or did they record the fake mission audio while they were all sitting around in a motel room in Fort Lauderdale? And how do we reckon with the thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of engineering logs, which also exist and are also available for public consumption? Did the engineers know they were toiling in service of history's biggest hoax? Or were they also hoodwinked by the conspirators? And most vexingly of all, how did we convince our adversaries in the Soviet Union to go along with the hoax? Because doesn't it seem odd? Doesn't it seem rather screamingly counterintuitive that the Soviets had radar and observational records indicating that all 9 of our manned lunar flights actually went to the moon and were always exactly where NASA claimed they were? Are the Soviet records all forgeries too? Or were they also paid off by the conspirators? Wouldn't they have had everything to gain by blowing the lid off the biggest hoax in world history? But we know how this all works. Moon hoax believers have never considered the answers to any of those questions. It would never occur to them to even ask the questions in the first place. And this is exactly why, in a world full of credulous, low-information ignoramuses who've never been taught how to think critically and how to differentiate true things from bullshit things, conspiracy theories are such a seductive form of intellectual crack cocaine. They are seductive and addictive precisely because they offer foolish, ignorant people a shortcut to a happy state of self-delusion where they can feel like they are smarter than everybody else and they are the possessors of secret, exclusive knowledge. Or maybe I have got this whole thing wrong and Kim Kardashian really is my intellectual superior. And speaking of people with unfounded delusions of intellectual superiority, Hollywood just had its worst October at the domestic box office since 1997. And no, there is no caveat at the end of that sentence that says adjusted for inflation. We are talking absolute dollars here. Mainstream theatrical motion pictures were only able to earn $425 million in October of 25, which is actually far more disastrous than it sounds, even without any inflationary adjustments, because the average Hollywood movie costs about 3.5 times as much to make today than it did in 1997. Back then, if you made a picture for 30 or 40 million and it pulled, let's say, 75 million at the box office and another 25 million in video rentals and DVD sales, then that was a fantastically profitable venture. That's the kind of performance that'll impel the studio to say, yep, you go ahead and make 2 or 3 sequels to that bad boy. Keep up the good work. But today, not so much. The back-end profits that used to have the potential to turn a break-even picture into a profitable picture, your video rentals and your physical media sales, that stuff doesn't exist anymore. Once your picture is no longer in the theater, you're basically in the same spot as a YouTube content creator. You sign over the rights to whatever streaming platform you're contractually required to sign it over to, and then you make a few fractions of a penny for each minute that people spend streaming the thing. And the picture is no rosier in terms of the potential for front-end profit. The big studios spend nearly all of their available production budgets today on disposable superhero sci-fi disaster movie trash, where you're spending more money on digital effects houses and 3,000 computer animators than it should cost to make the entire movie. So now you're in a world where your baseline budget is $300 million. You're spending another $150 to $200 million on advertising and promotion. And in order to make anything resembling a decent profit, you need the picture to pull at least $1 billion at the box office. Now, big budget flops have always been a thing. Money-losing box office bombs have always been a thing. But studios used to be able to insulate themselves against those flops and those bombs and their associated losses through sheer force of content. Some of the most wildly profitable, most studio-enriching films of the 70s and 80s and 90s were smaller budget pictures that wound up doing great business and making a shitload of money by getting positive reviews and good word of mouth. You get 2 or 3 of those every year, and it's easy to absorb the failure of your huge budget sci-fi action franchise movie that died a death at the box office. But the studios, in a momentous act of stupidity and short-sightedness, have built themselves a status quo now where basically everything that gets released in the theater is a huge budget action franchise picture. The small budget movies that used to function as an insurance policy against those failures simply don't get theatrical releases anymore. They go straight to streaming, and most people are never even aware of their existence. And what's the net result of all this going to be? It is going to be to hasten the AI takeover of the motion picture business. We are only a few years off, mark my words, from reaching a point where you'll be able to make a brand new romantic comedy starring John Wayne and Marilyn Monroe, directed by the robot ghost of John Ford. It will cost drastically less than the 58th installment in your Marvel DC superhero cinematic universe, and it will make more money. And speaking of people who need to make more money, it's time for everyone's favorite segment of the WPWWWU when we check in with our very good friends across the pond in the jolly old Islamic Caliphate of Britannistan, where the artist formerly known as Prince Andrew, Duke of York, might need to consider learning a skilled trade at this point. You may have seen the news last week that Prince Andrew would no longer be called the Duke of York. Then the news arrives this week that he won't even be called Prince Andrew anymore. He is going to be plain old Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. There is something fitting, something really quite ironic, in the fact that commoner Andy's brand new moniker has Mountbatten in it, because that very name harkens back to the last instance where British princes found themselves forcibly deprived of their royal status. Now, as you probably know, the current British royal family originated as a German royal family, or princely family, as the case may be, the Electors of Hanover, to be specific. They were imported in the first decade of the 18th century, so there would no longer be any risk of Protestant England having a Catholic monarch, and the result of that was that for the next couple of hundred years, you had half a dozen generations of British royals who also held German royal titles, and conversely, German royals who held British royal titles. But on the outbreak of the First World War, this became a rather untenable situation. The British monarch, King George V, reacting to charges in the press that he was a dull foreigner, angrily declared, "I may be dull, but I will be damned if I am a foreigner." So he changed the name of the British royal house from the scandalously German-sounding Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, which it had been since Queen Victoria married Prince Albert in 1840, to the more comfortably English-sounding Windsor. And he furthermore decreed that all British nobles who held German royal titles would have to surrender those titles. The most prominent family that was affected by this was the house that was then known as Battenberg. Prince Louis of Battenberg, in fact, was First Lord of the Admiralty and head of the British Navy at that time. Now, he was probably the last guy who ought to have been suspected of being a German sympathizer, but even still, he said, "Fine, not only will I surrender my German princely title, but I will even anglicize my family name." And so Prince Louis of Battenberg duly became Louis, Marquis of Milford Haven, whose second son, Admiral Lord Louis Mountbatten, became the most famous of all the former Battenbergs, and also lent his surname to his nephew, the former Prince Philip of Greece and Denmark, when he wed the future Queen Elizabeth II. And then Prince Philip, some years later, famously declared, "I am nothing but a bloody amoeba. I am the only man in the country whose children can't take his name." And so the Queen decreed in 1960 that thenceforth all members of the family without royal titles would carry the hyphenated surname of Mountbatten Windsor. Did Prince Andrew ever think he would have occasion to make use of that name? Probably not, but he has such occasion now. He's been deprived of his peerages and his knighthoods, thrown out of his lodgings at Windsor Castle, and now he will have to rent a room from his big brother Charles on the grounds of the Sandringham estate with no source of income except probably his military pension. And when he wants to travel, he'll have to take a train just like the rest of the unwashed commoner masses, which means he will have a non-zero chance of being stabbed by a crazed knifeman, as happened to 11 people on the train from Doncaster to London yesterday, when it took the authorities 15 hours to release any information on the identity of the attackers. And that's how we knew a white guy didn't do it, because that's just the way these things go. If it's a white dude, they tell you it was a white dude within the first 5 minutes. And if it's a white dude waving an English flag while singing Rule Britannia, then it only takes them about 3 minutes. But it's okay, guys, because this totally wasn't terrorism. It turns out the attackers were both black, and they were both born in Britain. Now, why would two black dudes stab 11 people on a train for reasons having nothing to do with terrorism? Unclear. Maybe they just both simultaneously suffered an unfortunate mental health crisis. I mean, who can say? But I guess the more appropriate question is, what would actually have to happen in order for the British cops to say a thing was terrorism? I mean, aside from a white guy being the assailant, because that goes without saying, a few weeks ago, when a Muslim dude went on a deadly stabbing spree in a synagogue while screaming Allahu Akbar, they said that also wasn't terrorism. So I guess the question that is begged is, What would a non-white assailant have to do in order for the British cops to say the thing he did was terrorism? And for that matter, a second question is also begged. Why is the public supposed to be reassured when the cops say that a mass casualty act of violence was not terrorism? Is that supposed to make the victims in the hospital with life-threatening stab wounds feel better? I mean, what? You wake up from your medically induced coma and your wife leans in and says, "It's okay, love. You were stabbed 17 times by 2 crazed knifemen on the train, but thank the good Lord it wasn't terrorism." Yeah, seems legit. Great job, England. But in closing our British segment this week, there's one overriding question I think we all need to ponder. Do we really want to see what it looks like when Andrew Mountbatten Windsor is no longer operating under any strictures of royal propriety? Do we really want to see what Randy Andy is going to get up to when his behavior is unchecked by any concern for the loss of his royal styles and titles? When he was already surrendering to nearly all of his most licentious impulses as it was, what in God's name is it going to look like when he is operating under no expectations that are different from those of the common commoner? Mr. and Mrs. Britain may want to consider locking up their wives and daughters, is all I'm saying. But then they have already probably locked up their wives and daughters to keep them safe from being culturally enriched by the denizens of the local migrant hotel. So perhaps it's all a moot point anyway. And with that, I am done. That is all I have got. This has been the WPWWWU for the 2nd of November, 2025. Thank you ever so much for your kind attention. I now convey you into the able custody of my distinguished colleague, your illustrious co-host, the one and only, your friend and mine, Mr. Caucasian Sasquatch.
Tactical nuke incoming!
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Blast Radius. And tonight we're going to discuss the madness of King George. I've got a little bit of footage over here. I've got a few Snapchat cut-off reactions over here we're going to talk about. And I went and got a body language ghost video where all of the evil denizens of the AI server farm that runs this particular server or have all apparently had a meeting in public where everybody could look at them. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to look at them and see what she has to say about it. What is up, bud? How'd you do?
I would like to see that body language ghost thing. I didn't know about that. That sounds exciting.
You want me to pop it up first?
Yeah, let's pop that up.
You can do it.
You can do it, Gary.
There it is. It's a 15-minute video.
Hello, everyone in chat. Nice to see you.
These people. The Thomas. Wait, what is this? These people, right? Some of these are creepos. It's the intelligence reports. It's all about the CIA Director John Brennan regarding the falsified intelligence reports. It's a particular little public hearing thing that they did, not hearing, but they were subjected to questioning, right? Are you ready for it?
I'm ready for it.
Been waiting for these people to be confronted.
I forgot. I had it set for half speed for the video.
Oh, I thought she was just talking extra sexy there for a minute.
She did sound a little drunk. All right.
Body language, ghost bedroom voice.
Confronted. I've also been waiting for them to be arrested. And no, I do not care about any congressional committee hearing or any of that mess. It means absolutely nothing. And TikTok, because we almost to the end of the year, and after the end of the year, ain't nobody arrested, then you can really tick it off the list. Business as usual. But I digress. So Brennan, guys remember him? He's been confronted numerous amounts of times. You guys remember the saying, the prophetic word, they're not going to be able to walk down the street. I'm okay with that. Before we get started, go to my Patreon. There are links in the description, and please sign up. Exclusive content, the ability to vote on videos. And I read.
All right. Everybody get that?
You know who I'm wondering about? Just I mean, as long as we are on the subject of hideously corrupt criminal former Biden administration officials. If we get all the way to next year's midterms without the enemy saboteur Mayorkas being hauled before Congress to answer for his many crimes and his role as an accessory in the deaths of nearly 500,000 Americans, that's going to be a fairly serious problem, because I want to know why the hell that is.
I'm curious myself. I'm not going to lie. I've never heard anyone put it quite as succinctly as you do, sir.
And out of all the people that Biden's auto pen gave pardons to on the last day, he was not one of them. So that is no kind of impediment against why he shouldn't be getting criminally investigated right up his ass right now. So I am at a loss to understand any of that.
All right.
Classical stories, not only fanciful, but nonfiction. I tell you what, them nonfictions ones was wow. We got dumber as we got older. So here we go. Now, as you can read at the top, Thomas Speciale confronts former CIA Director John Brennan regarding falsified intelligence reports. Interview was the 30th of October, 2025.
Go ahead and start taking audience questions. Sound good? Why don't we start over here?
All right. I want to point
he's
out,
already a little.
homeboy here had picked out who he was going to ask the first question before he ever started, because he pointed at somebody that was completely off of his frame of reference.
And they've probably pre-screened all of them anyway. Or oftentimes with these things, sometimes the people who are putting on the shindig actually write the questions themselves and then pick out audience members to read them. These things are so often just off the charts fakery.
Yeah, I mean, I still want to kind of hear what she has to chew on about it, because I kind of respect her interpretation of things, because it's kind of how I see stuff when I see people.
And if I'm John Brennan, I have no idea what that guy thinks he has to gain by continuing to say words in public.
noises out of his mouth hole.
Yeah.
A bit stressed about taking audience questions. And I'm going to guess that he can read the room. There are eyeballs that really don't like him. And this one's about the ass is probably giving him some stink eye, probably not intentionally, but it's definitely not friendly. So he's rubbing his face, shifting his feet. He's a little stressed.
It should be on.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good.
Watch the hand.
First, I want to introduce myself. My name is Tom Speciale.
Right there. The flex begins. My name's Tom Speciale. Fingers flexed this direction like, oh, I'm going to assume either he knows the name, whatever it is that he's looking at.
All right, so home chick right here, when she heard that name, she flinched towards this guy. Like she was nodding homie over. It's like, yeah, it's him. Go get him.
They're saying, God, who the hell let that guy in here?
He didn't start really reacting to it in the flex part until the name came up. So I'm going to assume he doesn't know his facial.
I've been a career intelligence officer for over 20
then you
years in
see
the
it
military
keeps
for over
going.
34 years. I recently left the DNI as a senior advisor for Tulsi Gabbard on counterintelligence and
And the
security.
feet.
And in fact, I made many of the suggestions.
Now we got back
on
to the
dismantling.
face. So we're getting like multiple tells. This is becoming extreme stress. Just from this guy, just giving you his resume, basically. It's like, oh, he knows it's coming. Now we can be all excited. Woohoo, he's all stressed out because he got confronted. But why? If you're not going to jail about it, and there's really no, how do we say, consequence to any of the actions that these people are doing, why are you getting stressed about it? What is the part of this stressor that is really kicking him in the butt? Let's watch.
Indeed.
Home chick
Why
here.
why so stressed, John Brennan?
Also, this chick here is kind of reacting to the list of what would it be, accommodations or employment history or whatever. She seems to be reacting to it as though she knows something about it.
Look at how evidently uncomfortable this man is before the first question has ever been asked. So I go back to the question, what does he think he's gaining by appearing at this thing?
I've got no idea.
Maybe we'll figure it out.
Some of the things that are being dismantled, and also made some suggestions on improvements, which I'd love to talk to you guys afterwards and get your feedback on. Because
I'm starting to honestly think this whole finger to the nose things was a signal, because then you see the lifting of the chin as he does it. Look, see me?
I'd love to talk to you.
And like a digging literally into his eyeball to stop this individual. I'm going to assume these three are not involved in whoever in the world he's signaling about what's going on. Whoever it was or whatever it was apparently did not want to acquiesce his request. I'm going to go back. I want to see this finger again. So he's got this look, direct line.
Made some suggestions on improvements, which I'd love to talk to you guys afterwards and get your feedback on.
He did it again. Yeah, it's just stress. Stress, and I swear.
Switching hands.
It's a signal, but it's not guaranteed. There's only the one tell of I can't stop digging in my eyeball, but it's a pretty good tell.
Because hopefully it's going to be going to some important desks very
And then again,
shortly. I want to agree completely, Director, with your assessment on Iran being on their heels. We've got to keep them on their heels until they reform. We've got to do that. I disagree on the deep state, only because Trump says it's the deep state. But as we all know, it's really
What? Did I hear that? What did you just say? I disagree.
I don't know,
with
but
the
if he keeps digging in that eyeball, it's going to pop straight out of his skull. He's going to look like Big Van Vader in that one Japanese death match where his eyeball popped out and he had to pop it back in and finish the match.
Jesus, dude. He said, I don't believe in the deep state because of Trump. Says it's the deep state.
heels. We've got to keep them on their heels until they reform. We've got to do that. I disagree on the deep state, only because Trump says it's the deep state. But as we all know, it's really just the entrenched bureaucrats that run.
It's the same thing, dude. One is a synonym for the other.
I joined the after panel on a debate a couple of nights ago. I don't know, it's been maybe a week now, where the discussion was whether or not the deep state existed. And one of the guys took such a vague definition of deep state, or rather such a specific dated definition, that really just kind of bypassed the whole concept of the debate. So like, you couldn't define our modern deep state as an 1840s concept coined by this one particular German somewhere, right? So,
well, yeah, and speaking of tells, that's a pretty big tell. When each time they want to wander off into the weeds of semantics and just talk about the precise meaning of certain words and phrases, that means they don't want to have the actual conversation.
right.
In the country. I'll get to my question. I will.
Yeah, please.
But I want to establish sort of my bona fides on this question before I ask it, because I really hesitated to put you guys on the spot on this in public. But if you're not going to be at the after hours, I got to take my chance now. I was at the DNI when
he's made all of them stress. You see these hands there?
Yes.
What are you doing, young lady?
the first
Yeah, there.
ICA was released.
Oh, good Lord. They
It's
may
a
be going after
smorgasbord.
Brennan, but his head is just the one that is up above the rest of them at the moment. This is
I
kinda
want to
like
see some
me
close-ups so she can do her hardcore body
Metaphor
language
is
ghosting.
that as soon as they lop off his head, someone else's head is going to be sticking up. And then you're going to realize the entire room is filled with these people. But again, nobody's going to jail. So what are we scared about?
regarding cyber influence on the 2016 election. I was there. I was working in the NIM. I read it. I also
Well, two of them, the lady and the gray man, look like they stamping their feet ready to run.
was
They wanna get
involved
up
in
and go.
setting up the
Homeboy here's playing a banjo and home chicks be crocheting for 5 minutes straight.
And the question still hasn't even been asked.
Right, exactly. I'm worried about this question.
meeting that took place in December that resulted in President Obama directing a more fulsome, because I understand the difference between a cyber ICA and a total whole of government ICA intelligence collection on Russian involvement or influence in the election. And I noticed immediately in the ICA, the second ICA, because I had access to the classified ICA, that there were statements in that ICA that were not supported with the sourcing that was associated to the ICA, specifically that that Putin had directed the action and that Putin had, that the Russians were actively trying to support President Trump instead of just sow chaos.
Your question.
My question, There was an email that went around.
All right. So this gentleman here,
Wow.
yeah, whoever's made the comment, we need to stop calling them gentlemen. Yeah, you're right. Ladies and gentlemen is a very forgiving term of what these people truly are. But anyways, the fact that he's just trying to shut him down. I mean, we're not talking like he's going, I just want to know what your favorite color is. These are serious questions. A true patriot of just humanity, not even allied to any particular country or religion, just a patriot of humanity would sit there and go, oh, okay, wow, this is some heavy stuff. Yeah, ask that question because morally this is bad. But no, they're all complicit and working together to stop this. Are you seeing how that works? Yay, he got confronted. But all his little friends are actively in the role of shutting it down. None of these people are your friends. It's a den of vipers.
From General Clapper to yourself and Hayden. I'm sorry, not Hayden.
So he adjusts himself really big in that chair right there. And you see him kind of go side to side and go up with his head. It's pretty much a defiance. He's not afraid. He's irritated that it's being out there and pushed on. I'm waiting for the moment when he goes off.
That's right.
And he's looking down his nose now.
Yourself and
I think homie said something that twigged him off to what the question is specifically going to be about now, and he knows how he's going to answer it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Sir, are you questioning my status as an upstanding public servant?
Right?
Because I will look down my nose at you and strongly refute that correct assertion.
And give you a firm huzzah.
A firm huzzah.
That basically said we all got to get on board with this, otherwise it isn't going to work, basically. And I think that email puts everybody in the crosshairs.
I sit there and saw that and I was like, what was that? I go back and Mr. Gray here gives a dead eye to Brennan. It's like he gives him the dead eye and then he becomes indignant of what the email has said. It's like, dude, you're part of the room defending these people and you're surprised about what's in the email? You see the mouth go closed tight and then he tries to visibly put himself away from Brennan.
I would like to hear what your justification was for supporting the dossier that was known to be false being used as source material in the second ICA.
There it is.
I don't know who put you up to this.
Nobody put me up to this, sir. I'm here
I
on
don't
my
know
own.
what role you played or who you are, but it's a bunch of bullshit.
Straight to the ad hominem. Straight to the freaking ad hominem.
Snake, Brennan, lies to these snakes. Because now they're all looking at him and they're getting uncomfortable as it's like a two-way. They're uncomfortable with the guy asking the tough questions. And then they're also uncomfortable with, oh my gosh, what did he do? I mean, we all agreed that we couldn't let ABC happen, but nobody said we were doing Z. This is the equivalent of going to rob somebody and your little gang goes into the house and one of your victims dies and you're surprised. Well, what did you think what was going to happen if you did armed robbery? I guess they really weren't for the thug life. Who put you up?
He goes straight to refusing to engage with the question because he doesn't want to engage with the question.
Yeah.
Instead, it's you. I don't know who you are, who put you up to this. You. It's all about attacking the questioner rather than engaging with the question, which is exactly what I would expect a guy like John Brennan to do.
That checks out completely.
To this. So going back to the earlier thing of, well, what are they really afraid of? Because ain't none of them going to jail. None of them are losing their livelihood. I ain't seen nobody give up their, third, fourth, fifth homes, vacation properties, and everything else underneath the moon. So what are they afraid of? And it looks like that is what just came out of what they're afraid of. The little vipers, most of them knew about ABC, but apparently none of them knew about Z. And that's what they're upset about. They're not afraid of you. They're not afraid of Kash Patel. What they're afraid of is their other room of vipers finding out that they did more than what they said they were going to do. And then we get to sit there and find out how far these vipers are willing to go.
That you just passed on.
Absolutely.
You got anything to add to that? Because
Not yet. Let's let Brennan dole out the rope to hang himself with.
all right.
Emails are clear, sir.
Bullshit.
The emails are clear.
Bullshit.
The emails are clear. The second question
No, I think we're going to.
is the
So the other guy is sitting there going, next. He's decided he's done, even though he was like, oh, you went to Z? Oh, what the heck? But again, he's willing to go the distance. He's going for protection of Brennan. Next. Is there any sheep that want to ask a question? He wants to know what kind
Yeah.
of ice cream you have.
is
Look, you can, look, we can talk about it. Talk about it in the.
Now he's relaxed in his chair. He's sat back. He's throwing his hand at him because the other vipers in the room, oh, they haven't abandoned me, even though I didn't tell them about Z. It's okay. All good. All right, let's go on. We don't really need to see too much of the meltdown. Here we have another example of the den of vipers. And one of them is asking him, why did you do Z? I thought we all agreed on ABC. Why did you do Z?
Why wouldn't you know on the 100 by Why say it? Because I did it. And you misrepresented that. We never said it was disinformation. We said it was Russian influence operations, which is what they do. There's a big difference between influence.
And that's how he reacts. You do know that in the
Pokey
animal
poke.
kingdom,
Poking you. Oh
usually-
man, I would level that dude if he put his finger on me like that. Are you kidding me?
Don't touch.
You do not get to touch me for asking you a question, sir. I know you want to posture and act like Mr. Tough Guy, but you take that finger and put it somewhere else immediately.
Yeah, I believe. Well, I don't think it snakes on a plane, Auntie, because I don't think you'll get more than one or two of these guys in any particular plane.
You know, and men who have done nothing wrong, who have nothing nefarious they need to answer for, do not react to things that defensively.
Agreed. Absolutely. He didn't act defensive. He's acting offensive, as though he doesn't understand how conversation works.
Yeah, like he's accustomed to just being able to shout people down when he hears inconvenient questions.
Yep.
Don't you know who the hell I am?
That's exactly what this is. The finger to the chest. Do you have any idea who you're fucking with?
Yep.
Right? No matter how dumb they are or how wrong, they're the boss. And with his little finger in that other viper's chest, and they're both, how do you say, cockfighting for height. How much further could the other guy raise his chin up to try and stand over him? Oh, not enough, sweetie. Your poison sacks are empty.
No, you don't know that.
Actually, literally pushed him back. The finger pushed, and the other dude, who's not really pushing, just went with it, pushed back. Yeah. So
You can't
this
let a man
moment-
do that to you, guy.
in this den of vipers, nobody's
Dude, you know how happy it would make me if somebody had headbutted his ass right there. He's like, just
That's
nutted him right
exactly
there.
what he deserves. I mean, what a scumbag.
I'm talking like Saturday night at the soccer pitch.
Yeah, I mean, what kind of company do you normally keep where you think you can act that way? I mean, what kind of world of delusion are you living in, John Brennan?
I guess you're right. That is exceptionally offensive, especially in public. This is exactly the environment that sort of shit was designed for.
Yep.
Kick him in the balls.
real happy about the ABCs that turned into Z. So now Brennan is having to go, so what if we did Z? Because that's basically what's being translated here. You dropped the loaded gun. It's your fault. I wouldn't have killed him if you'd have just done your part of it. You're the one that dropped the ball on B. And that's literally how it's playing out. Right before your merry eyes. Apparently it's making everyone uncomfortable. Oh, I wonder if they're going to fight. He promised me love earlier.
You don't know. Naomi knew. The literature said it had all the hallmarks.
Purple shirt guy actually avoids direct eye contact with him. I submit. I submit. I'm a pussy. I'm a pussy.
The literature said it had all the hallmarks.
And once again with the dismissive hand wave.
Hold it back here. Not.
Yeah. He's used to just brushing people off.
Yep.
That's right.
I would have been happy also. I mean, a headbutt would have been good, as you mentioned, but also if he had just taken the bottle and bashed him in the head with it, like an English pub
Slashed
fight,
his
that
ass.
would have been awesome.
Glassed his ass like a drunk wine mom on Thursday.
Yep, that's what I'm talking about.
Lean in like you're going to whisper something in his ear and then lift the hard knee. Exactly.
This Baldy, but
I like
this
the way
one.
he
And those
thinks.
of you who sit there and go, "Oh, we gotta love these whistleblowers," whatever. I guess these whistleblowers sat in there and never told anybody anything until it became a power play or financial gain or lucrative for them. And one of these days, you'll figure that out. Right now, I guess I'll be the only one saying that. And for the latest one, he's in the subway. And this is what I mean by the walking down the street.
So I was just trying to get you to clear it up. If you saw the dossier before the election.
Read my memoir.
I've read excerpts of it.
Come on.
Are you concerned about a possible indictment coming from DOJ? What do you think about the situation now? Anything you could say, sir? Just want to
Yeah,
clear
play
the
with
air.
your phone, dipshit.
But obviously, he's just avoiding. I'm not going
Right.
to look at you. I'm going to play on my phone. I'm ignoring you. He's a viper all by himself.
chance to talk.
And you know what they do,
But-
right?
Did you see it?
They sit quietly until it's time to bite.
The Steele dossier or not? That's pretty much the gist of the situation, right? You have nothing to say, sir, about it?
I'm surprised he doesn't have a couple of heavies with him.
Yeah, I'm wondering about
Would you
that.
be
You
involved
reckon he's on the menu?
testimony before the judiciary?
Yeah, I don't know.
in the coming weeks?
It seems weird that a guy like that would just be standing alone in a subway station.
I agree. I mean, he might get knifed. You never know.
I mean, we know he lost his security clearance, so maybe along with the loss of the security clearance means you don't get government provided security guys anymore, and maybe he's just too much of a cheap bastard to pay for his own.
Perhaps he doesn't have his government driver anymore.
Or yeah, that's a possibility too. He's texting the heavies right now.
Now he's
Hmm.
looking
Wait,
to.
no, that doesn't really check out. Why aren't they already here?
Yeah, because that's the way people normally operate who want to keep themselves insulated from inconvenient questions. They have a couple of heavies around them, and when somebody comes up trying to ask an inconvenient thing, the heavy just sort of pushes them back and, you know, gets them away from their guy.
Right? You lean on them, they lean in harder.
Yep.
Back to this one. We're gonna do the part you wanted to talk about, right?
Boom.
We're doing it. Is happening right now. Skadoosh. No, why does it do right? It's supposed to go back to this. Right. All right, so what was it? Tuesday you hit me up with some check out the madness of King George.
No, it was yesterday morning.
Was it yesterday morning? Dude,
Yep.
I've had such a messed up freaking past few days. My sleep is completely screwed. Like right after this show, I'm going to bed so that I can get up and pick up my daughter at 4:00 in the morning from work. Right.
And I have no explanation for why I have never watched this picture in the 30 years since it came out. I've always heard good things about it, but for some reason just never got around to watching it. And what a picture this is. And you know, in addition to being a fascinating snapshot of a very interesting incident in British history, it's like I told you yesterday, if British acting was pornography, this movie would be illegal in 100 countries.
You're right. The only reason I've seen this movie before this is because we had a English literature teacher who, for whatever reason, played this movie at least twice a year in every class she had. So
I can see why.
I can see why now, especially with the little excerpt of Hamlet stuck off in the middle of it, of King Lear, of King, old Chucky Boy the Third over here reading King Lear in a Madness episode is absolutely darling.
And it also, I think, is a great case study of how good a movie based on a stage play can be when you have the same lead actor and you have the author of the stage play also writing the screenplay. That's as good as it gets when you're adapting a stage play into a motion picture.
All right, so I can't remember any of these guys' names, but it is loaded with a double handful of high B tier, decent A tier actors, right?
Yeah, I've got the cast list for you right here. Nigel Hawthorne plays the lead role as King George III. Helen Mirren plays Queen Charlotte with a very convincing German accent, I thought. Ian Holm, who everybody here will know as late period Bilbo Baggins from the Lord of the Rings trilogy. He plays the King's Doctor. Amanda Donahoe as Lady Pembroke. Rupert Graves, who's always good, as Captain Greville. Jeffrey Palmer as Dr. Warren. Rupert Everett as the profligate, wastrel Prince of Wales, the future George IV. Jim Carter as the leader of the opposition, Charles James Fox. And that's just about all of the notable people that will have been mostly heard of by our audience. That's just
Right.
but everybody in the thing is pretty uniformly outstanding.
Yeah, they're all excellent casting, not just for the roles they're playing, but just in general. I like a lot of the people in this movie, and I didn't realize it going into it. But I recognize that about half of the primary characters as professional actors, and I can't tell you what work
Yeah,
they've done.
and there's a few in there where you're not exactly sure who they are. It's one of those. It's that guy from that one movie. It's
Right, exactly.
those type of things.
There's a bunch of that guy from that one movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Here, I've seen him in a half dozen films. I just can't name any of them.
Uh-huh.
I mean, he's one of those English fellows.
You try and think of their name for 5 or 10 minutes, and then you give up and just go to Wikipedia, and then you're like, God damn it, I knew that's who that was, but I couldn't think of it.
All right. So, in the process of this film, King George goes from being the slightly erratic individual he is as royalty into what appears to be a full psychotic break.
Yes.
And
this is his first extended psychotic break, which is now referred to as the Regency crisis of 1788-89. Some people think it was brought about by the trauma of losing the American colonies, which we call our victory in the Revolutionary War. But there was actually an earlier, briefer period in 1765, which was about a dozen years before this one, where they think there might have been a brief episode of mania that presaged the later mania. This episode, the Regency crisis of 1788-89, wound up persisting for a little more than half a year, and it did obviously precipitate a constitutional crisis. But he did ultimately recover and stayed recovered with fairly brief exceptions for a little more than 20 years. But finally, in 1810, after the death of his favorite daughter, Princess Amelia, he had a final break with reality and fell completely off the deep end and spent the final decade of his life from 1810 to 1820 completely stark raving mad, blind and deaf, and talking to people who weren't there. And it was just about as bad as mental illness gets. And that was when a regency did have to be proclaimed. And so the profligate, wastrel, dissipated Prince of Wales did exercise the powers of the monarch for those 10 years, and then ascended the throne himself and had a 10-year reign in his own right from 1820 to 30.
So you said something back earlier today. We were texting, and you said that he was the last or the best king of England, Charles III.
I think he was the best king of England. I mean, to the extent that, in terms of his interests, he reminds me a lot of Thomas Jefferson. In terms of the fact that he really liked to be knowledgeable and well read on a lot of widely different fields. He also took his kingship very seriously. He was also very, very happily married to Queen Charlotte, which is why it's so sad that his doctors decided to separate him from his wife when his manic episodes first hit, because that was just about the cruelest thing they could have done to the guy. You don't treat an unstable man by removing his most stabilizing influence. And never took mistresses, as kings were always routinely supposed to do back then. They had 15 children together, and the most remarkable aspect of the fact that they had 15 children together is that when he dies in 1820, even though he's got 5 sons, he only has 1 surviving legitimate grandchild, because all of his sons just had mistresses and illegal marriages to Catholics and what have you. So, and that's actually how Queen Victoria winds up coming to the throne, because George IV, who is the profligate Prince of Wales in this movie, he reigns from 1820 to 1830, and then he has no surviving legitimate issue because his daughter, Princess Charlotte, died in childbirth a few years back, who was George III's only surviving legitimate grandchild. And then his brother, King William IV, comes to the throne for a few years. And then there is a mad dash as soon as Princess Charlotte dies in childbirth, that the George IV's remaining sons, who are all in their 40s or 50s at that point and didn't think they needed to care about having legitimate children, they all start a mad dash to find wives and have children. And it's his 4th son, Prince Edward, Duke of something or other. It escapes me right now, but he winds up managing to squeeze out Queen Victoria, Princess Victoria at the time. But yeah, 15 freaking children, and it's still that much of a closely run thing, trying to come up with an heir, which is just remarkable.
Not a single legitimate issue.
Exactly.
Wow. And this is the king that lost the colonies, but you got to admit, it was a tough run fight.
And it wasn't, and you know, it is a very convenient narrative to make, you know, the king the object of the opprobrium of the colonists, but he wasn't really that bad of a king as kings go. I mean, it's easy to pull down a statue of a king. You can't really pull down a statue of a prime minister. So I understand why the king has to be the object of all the animus and all the unpleasant words in the Declaration of Independence and so on. And it's too bad for him. It's too bad for everybody, really, because as we know from the minutes of both the First Continental Congress and the Second Continental Congress, all of the people on our side who later became our revolutionaries, who all signed our Declaration of Independence, their first preference would have been to remain loyal subjects of His Majesty. All we ever asked for was a couple of seats in Parliament. They wouldn't give us any, and we won't accept having taxes levied against us if we don't have representation in the legislative body. So there you go. We're going to have to fight now. You guys chose this. We didn't.
Was it Duke of Wellington?
No, it was Duke of
Aquitaine.
One second.
I do the thing, bro. You know it's going to make your brain itch if you don't.
I know it already. I'm already so ashamed of myself that I can't think of it offhand.
So the guy who plays his oldest son is the most foppish, arrogant individual I've seen in film in a while.
Duke of Kent and Strathern.
There you go. So he does a phenomenal job of portraying the basic laissez-faire royal heir apparent with a drinking problem and a womanizing problem, especially those damned Catholics, right?
And it's probably just about as close to the real history as you can get, because by all accounts, the future George IV really was that kind of a guy. And that's the other kind of amazing thing that seems to run through all of the generations of the Hanoverian monarchs, is that the father and the eldest son always absolutely hate each other's guts.
Well, that kind of checks out. I mean, I don't think that's uncommon in any generational gap.
And it's interesting to note that when George III came to the throne, he actually succeeded his grandfather and not his father. He was actually the eldest son of the Prince of Wales, but the Prince of Wales predeceased his father, George II, and so then the succession passed to the grandson, and George III comes to the throne at the age of 22, I believe. And that's why he had such a freakishly long reign of 59 years, I believe it was.
Right. This guy, the guy who played the oldest son, that dude right there, nailed it, bro. Like,
Oh, yeah. Absolutely hit it out of the park.
he made me giggle a few times, not so much with but with his reaction to something, but with his complete lack of acknowledgement that a line had been spoken. He was just like, he's
Yeah,
so
just that complete dismissiveness of everyone and everything, and the, you know, just the playing it to the hilt as the profligate, dissipated, wastrel son of the king who has to be told to smile and wave by his mother.
right.
Even though he would rather be anywhere else. He would rather be, you know, in some harlot's bed, sipping from a bottle of wine.
Okay, let's change gears a little bit here. Let's get in a little more specific into this period of madness and the period immediately before it and immediately after it. Now, before this, was there any evidence of cognitive dissonance going on in his average daily regime? I mean, when the movie enters, he's basically playing silly buggers out on the moor, right?
Yeah. There is only one episode in the years prior to 1788, and that comes in 1765. And I have a brief passage I can read from this book that's in front of me right now, if you would like me to.
Go for it, big dog.
On Thursday, 10 January 1765, the king opened Parliament with a short speech in which he welcomed the forthcoming marriage of his youngest sibling, Princess Caroline Matilda, to King Christian VII of Denmark, and made an earnest recommendation for the diminution of the national debt. As he left the House of Lords, the king felt the cold seize him. Over the next 2 days, Grenville found the king embarrassed and distant, then rather less cold, but still much embarrassed, which he put down to his having held further secret dealings with the opposition. In retrospect, this was in all likelihood the first instance of an illness that was in later years to be dubbed the King's Malady. On 13 January, the royal doctor Sir William Duncan visited him at Buckingham House and drew 14 ounces of blood, according to the standard 18th century practice of bleeding bad humors from patients. The illness was sufficiently serious for Duncan to visit the Prime Minister afterwards and inform him that the king had a violent cold, had passed a restless night, and complained of stitches in his breast. The following day, the king was too ill to receive ministers, but the day after that, Grenville found him perfectly cheerful and good-humored and full of conversation. From 16 January, the king was ill for 10 days continuously. The rumor spread, eagerly fanned by the likes of Henry Fox and Horace Walpole, that he had contracted pleurisy and was in grave danger. So critical a situation made men take notice that, wrote Walpole, to secrete him from all intercourse with his court, Lord Bute had placed the king at Buckingham House, a damp, unwholesome spot. It was even said that Dr. Duncan advised His Majesty to have one of his palaces in the country fitted up and to live there for some time. Walpole also suggested to Lord Holland that the king wasn't likely to live a year. He blamed Princess Augusta, later claiming that it was too notorious to be concealed that the Princess Dowager has brought into the royal blood a humor which occasioned the deaths of several of her children and at length her own, a slur both unfair and inaccurate, since she eventually died of cancer.
Huh.
So that's the only thing in the records that in anything that could be perceived as a bout of mental illness before the big Regency crisis of 1788-89.
And that could have been a gallstone.
Yeah, it could have been any number of things. It's difficult to ascribe it to being an early onset of the thing that later claimed his sanity. It's really a hell of a lot of guesswork, really.
It's true, and nobody will ever gain any ground, but damn it, I'm having fun. So if Homeboy had gallstones on the regular, then it would explain his regular complaints for a stitch in his side that would, generally subside after a few days.
Right.
It would also explain some of his tucking away at shortening of certain functions. And as I would assume we all know, gallstones are triggered by rich food, fatty type food. And so I don't know. I'll be very curious as to what type of diet this gentleman actually.
And he's a
Fucks
bit of
y'all.
he's a bit of an eccentric fellow to begin with, and so it can be very difficult to discern where eccentricity ends and mental illness begins. It's kind of a tightrope you have to walk diagnostically.
Yeah, I mean, eccentricity aside, he did some rather unkingly things.
Yes,
And of course,
especially once the events of 1788 start happening.
right. He seemed to develop something of a running dialogue with himself, where he basically spoke every thought that crossed his mind out loud. And that could be very disturbing, especially as a king.
Yes. And I have a further passage on the onset of the 1788 incident that I can read also if you'd like.
Go for it.
In the autumn of 1788, a constitutional crisis developed in England. On first sight, the problem was a very simple one. The health of the King George III deteriorated rapidly. Already in the summer, he suffered from several bilious attacks, according to his physicians, and his health worsened by the day. From the end of October, there were some rumors about the king's growing madness. On one occasion in November, Sir George Baker, the king's physician, was stopped by a London mob and forced to report on the king's state of health. When he confessed the case to be serious, the mob nearly lynched him. The doctors were absolutely bewildered. In the 18th century, nobody knew about porphyria, the king's real malady, and obviously this was written during the period when it was simply taken for granted that porphyria was the cause of his condition. So that with that having been said, they had no idea about the real cause of the illness of the king or if the recovery was possible. From early November onward, the king's condition became alarming. On the 6th, William Pitt, the prime minister, all night expected a messenger with an account of the king's death. The messenger didn't arrive, but the king's state remained desperate for months. In a constitutional and parliamentary monarchy with an active government, it may not be a great problem. The competent authority appoints a regent and the constitution remains intact. But in England, and in this particular case, the situation was much more difficult. This difficulty consisted by several elements. First, in the 18th century, the royal prerogatives were more extended than nowadays. Paradoxically, the events of 1688 and even more of 1714 didn't weaken, but strengthened the monarchy. The goal of the politicians was not to weaken the monarchy, but to create a Protestant one. The king was the head of the legislative and the executive government. Without his assent, there was no law. At this time, he still had the complete right of veto. He appointed and changed the governments nearly at his whim. Of the king's tyranny in December 1783 was the latest example when, in spite of the vote of the Commons, the king dismissed the Portland government without their formal and official resignation and appointed William Pitt, who was in a small minority in the House. The king was the head of the diplomatic service and of the foreign affairs. All the ambassadors consulted directly to him. His civil list wasn't separated from the state's income. He approved all the official nominations and the creation of peers. All the pensions and the salaries were granted by him. All the government's papers could be changed at his wish. He could reshape the diplomatic letters and the throne speeches. In the early 1780s, great debates were held in the parliament concerning the royal prerogatives and the power of the crown. But after 1783, the royal power remained entire. In Europe of the 1780s, an absolute monarchy seemed to be a natural solution. There were such tendencies in England, too. From the accession of George III onwards, there was a growing fear in parliamentary circles for the completing of the despotism. In conclusion, the royal person was not a negligible actor on the political stage, and a sudden malady could interrupt the state affairs for weeks, which is exactly what happened in this particular case, because the king becomes incapacitated and is incommunicado for an extended period, but there's been an election and there's a new parliament that needs to be seated, but you can't seat a new parliament without the king dissolving the old parliament, and then the new parliament can't begin its work without the monarch delivering the state opening of parliament speech. So that kind of grinds everything to a halt for quite a while. So the old parliament had to remain in place until the king regained his senses, and it wasn't a sure thing that he ever would regain his senses, which is why they had to start debating a bill of regency. And even if they had passed the bill of regency, it probably would have been illegal anyway. So you've got a whole raft of problems that the king's incapacity presents, and how do you deal with any of them?
Right. So after during this entire process of, as we've mentioned before, we don't have a whole lot of faith in the greatest minds of medicine of this time period, and what was he, a Protestant, was brought in to do to cure him. Apparently, some cousin of his had experienced some sort of similar thing, and they brought this guy in, and he worked just the trick, and only in like a few weeks, right? And he
Yeah.
has very
It
strict
was
rules.
a relative of Lady Pembroke's, if I'm not mistaken.
He has very strict rules and an absolute control over everything from diet to alcohol consumption and everything else, right? He basically takes on the personage of the king with only the king's valets between him and his subject, his patient.
And what a difference at the time between what is seen as standard medicine and what is seen as radically liberal, out of the box medicine. Because standard medicine is basically to torture the poor guy to death, to drain his blood and cup him and give him enemas and all this crazy stuff that isn't really going to do anything to ameliorate his psychosomatic complaint. But then the other guy comes in and says, how about let's just have him go work in the field? Let's have him focus his mind on something simple. I've had great success with this before. To which all of the fancy doctors, the finest doctors in the kingdom, say, you can't have the king do manual labor. What the hell is wrong with you, you maniac?
But still, they accept his personage. He takes over.
They do, and it was the queen who made that decision. And that's
Right.
really my only complaint about this film, is that it kind of portrays it that she was not the decision maker here, but it was the Prince of Wales who was making decisions on the care of the king, but it really wasn't. She was making she was getting bad advice, don't get me wrong, and that they told her that the best thing for her to do was to remove herself from his presence. And what's she supposed to say? I'm just a woman. I'm not a fancy doctor like you all. So she said, if that's what you think is best, then I'll do it. And obviously it was the worst possible thing they could have done. But yeah, she was imperfectly, albeit the primary decision maker, which I guess is probably the best arrangement they could have had ultimately.
Yeah, well, she was certainly operating in his best interest, I believe.
Yeah.
Looking at how it was handled. I mean, once she was removed from the decision making, immediate process. Not
and then
so
they had probably the happiest marriage in the history of royalty. They were very, very devoted to each other and loved each other deeply.
And I have to say, if that was indeed going to be her last act in a position of power over this court, then placing that man in control of her husband might have been the most brilliant thing she did.
Perhaps, yeah.
I mean, think about it. She removed the onus from herself so that it wasn't like she was, taking on heirs or powers she doesn't have or anything like that. She's not contending to be king. She's merely trying to take care of her husband. Right.
But you know what I really love is the scene where the king meets the doctor played by Ian Holm, whose name I can't remember right now, but I'm gonna look it up because it's gonna make my brain itch otherwise. Damn it. I just had that. Here it is. It is Francis Willis. That is the name of the doctor. When the king first meets Francis Willis, and what a great performance Ian Holm gives during this scene, because at first he is talking to the king in a very kindly, very, very understanding, very, very, very seemingly liberal way. I have a farm. I have a hospital. We can do this. He's speaking in a very soft tone of voice and sounds very, very nice. But then they open the door and you see the restraint chair. and he starts screaming and ranting like a villain. No, no, sir, you are the patient. I am the
Right.
king here now.
Right. And the dude does an amazing job of all of this because, first of all, the gentleman has an exceptional voice for
Oh yes.
like cracking to someone's attention or something. So like even when homie went off on one of his diabolical diatribes of mania, he would say something and immediately get the man's attention. And you could see why when you hear him say it. It's amazing.
Yeah. And also the even though there are no words spoken, but the scene where he's feeding the king soup and he gives the king the first spoonful of soup and it gets spit back in his face and you expect him to, to erupt in anger and order that the king be further restrained, but instead he just sits there stone-faced, says nothing, gives him a second spoonful, which he willingly eats and doesn't spit back. And what a fantastic bit of acting that was. The other
Right.
thing I wanted to mention also about the scene I was just discussing where he first meets Dr. Willis and then they open the door, the king tries to run away and ultimately he gets restrained, and all during this scene we are hearing the playing of the opening strains of Zadok the priest, which is the Handel coronation anthem that is always played immediately when the king is enthroned and about to be crowned, and it's sort of the instrumental build up and then boom, the voices hit when the crown goes on top of the king's head. And in this case the voices hit when the gag goes around his mouth. Like that's the
Right.
equivalent. That's the equivalent of the crowning for the purposes of the scene. And what a fantastic use of the music. I thought that was just freaking brilliant.
Right. I don't know, the whole thing was exceptionally well done. There's a whole bunch of like the dialogue is amazing. Okay, one of my favorite
know.
scenes
Yeah.
of the whole thing. There's this scene and this is funny. They comment on the fact that everyone's read Shakespeare, right? And then you find out that the doctor, the dear parsonage doctor, has not read Shakespeare because he is a holy man. What are you talking about? Why would I read Shakespeare?
Yeah,
Later-
exactly. Because it's easy for us to forget nowadays that in some quarters Shakespeare was seen as almost pornographic. Like something that was so racy a clergyman couldn't possibly consider reading it. And yeah, I agree. That was and they both look at him like he's just told them he has leprosy or something.
Right, I have smallpox.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then we just look at him like, how are you even walking around in England if you haven't heard the Bard?
Like
How?
you're the first Englishman I've ever met who hasn't read Shakespeare. That's exactly the look they give to him.
It's great. And so
Yep.
later, when the king has started to sort of come around to his senses, he somehow he hornswoggles them into doing a play with him, and he chooses a Shakespeare play to do, and of course, it is King Lear.
It is King Lear.
And so the doctor is sitting there reading the what did you call it, a parson? I think he's a parson, right?
Yeah.
The parson is sitting there reading with him, and one of the other gentlemen, I think was it Mr. Fox, shows up, comes over, and he's like, "What are we doing?" He's like, "Oh, we're reading." They're literally doing acting parts of King Lear in the garden or whatever, which it's fucking beautiful scene. It's just gorgeous. Every scene in this thing is a painting. And
I know. He's a fine doctor, but he's a terrible actor.
He's a terrible actor. And so the king's like, this guy can't get any of his lines right. He's like, well, I didn't know what it was about. I didn't realize it was about a mad king. I mean, come on, bro.
and that was the course of treatment that wound up bringing the king back to his senses for a little over 20 years, which is, a hell of a lot better than he would have done if he was left in the care of the Royal College of Physicians. We can safely conclude that.
I don't know though, dude. I think the choosing of King Lear was a joke on the doctor himself, right?
Oh yeah, clearly.
Clearly he was coming around to some of his senses at this point because he was able to pull a subtle joke like this, right? So now there's this
Yeah,
good
and then
scene. Go ahead.
and that was how some of his courtiers could see that he was coming back around to his senses, because they started to see little glimpses of his old personality coming back. And who would have guessed that, tilling in a field and sitting around reading Shakespeare would be the thing that did it, instead of shoving enemas up his ass and draining his blood. And sounds like a freaking horror movie the way they tried to medically treat mental illness.
It really was. Oh my Lord. The blistering, that's the worst in my
Yeah.
opinion. I mean, the leeching, the bleeding, all that stuff. Like, take hypothetically speaking, let's take an attack of a gallbladder attack, like one of those extremely painful. You'll think you're being fucking run through by a red hot poker.
Yep.
This sounds crazy, but draining a few ounces of blood will actually reduce the inflammation in the area and might allow you to pass the stone or whatever the issue is and go on with your life. I know that sounds weird, but it has to do with how much blood is available to be used for inflammation. And so there's a sort of sweet spot there where it could have an ameliorating effect, but not a healing one.
Yeah, but and in that case, you're doing it for a very specific physiological reason. It's not just a catch-all thing that you do when you can't think of anything else to do, which is what it was back then. Well, clearly he's got bad humors, so we need to drain the bad humors. So let's take some blood out of him, and if that doesn't work, let's take some more blood out of him. And then let's take some more, and then we have to take some blood out of his legs because we just made the bad humors drain from the upper part of his body to the lower part of his body. And it is amazing that anybody actually stayed alive with 18th century doctors in practice.
It's amazing. And there was the dude that was obsessed with the king's stool.
Oh God, I think the stool is much more eloquent.
he never even like saw the patient. It was his only focus was to get his hands on his.
Exactly. But that is a pretty accurate depiction of the way that doctors and medicine tended to be back then, because every doctor thought he had the magic bullet that could explain every symptom in every condition in every patient. And this guy thought that he could diagnose and treat and cure everything just by looking at a person's shit. And he was totally convinced of his rectitude. And it's the same level of conviction that other doctors had about bleeding and blistering and enemas and what have you, all kinds of interventions that did nothing but make the patient sicker.
There was one feature of this event that stuck out to me, and I was curious whether or not in any of that book there they mentioned anything more about the blue urine.
They do. Let me pull that up.
It's actually a concern. What I'm saying is that's a fairly unique complaint, right? That is a very unique symptom. And if it was something that was sporadic, that's one thing. But if it was through the entire course of his madness, that's an entirely different ball of wax. Because that could imply various types of poisons, or which, I mean, they would call medicine at the time. I mean, I'm not saying someone was intentionally poisoning him. I'm saying that his doctors were terrible. They were absolutely the worst possible thing that could ever happen. And this one dude who comes in, basically, he reduces the he reduces the selection of foods available to him. He takes control over the access to things like wine, water sources, and whatnot, and basically puts him into a very early type of behavioral conditioning regimen, where anytime, just like a 4-year-old, anytime they pitch a fit, he put him in the corner. But in this case, it was a full body restraint chair.
All right. You want me to read out the current state of medical understanding regarding the porphyria diagnosis?
Right. Okay.
The current medical consensus has largely rejected the theory that King George III suffered from porphyria, concluding instead that his symptoms are most consistent with bipolar disorder type 1 and later dementia. The porphyria diagnosis, once widely popular, is now considered seriously flawed by many experts in medical history and psychiatry. The diagnosis of acute porphyria was first proposed in the 1960s by a mother and son team of psychiatrists, Ida McAlpine and Richard Hunter, and gained widespread public acceptance due to its compelling narrative and adoption in popular culture, e.g., The Madness of King George play and film. However, subsequent in-depth analyses of the king's extensive medical records and private diaries by other medical professionals and historians have challenged this theory on several key points. 1. Selective evidence. Critics argue that McAlpine and Hunter were highly selective in their interpretation of the king's symptoms, highlighting those that fit the porphyria diagnosis while ignoring or downplaying contradictory evidence. 2. Symptom inconsistencies. The king's symptoms, such as the ability to ride a horse despite alleged muscle weakness in his hands, which is a system of porphyria-related peripheral neuropathy, were often intermittent, which is inconsistent with the typical prolonged recovery time for a porphyritic attack. Number 3, blue urine disputed. The much-cited blue urine was a rare single observation which has been plausibly explained as a reaction to the specific medications, such as gentian and aloes, that the king received, rather than a definitive sign of porphyria. And number 4, genetic claims. Claims about the genetic condition existing in other members of the royal houses of Europe have also been disputed as unsustainable based on clinical and genetic evidence. And it goes on to explain that the leading alternative diagnosis now is bipolar disorder with recurrent episodes of acute mania. And much of this is based on linguistic analysis of the king's letters during his episodes, which showed that excessively long rambling sentences, a feature often observed in the manic phase of bipolar disorder, featured more prominently and more frequently in things that he wrote during his manic episodes.
I kind of want to tell AI to go look at the rest of his writings and see if you can find any other examples of such things. But that's just my.
I think that's actually been part of the recent analysis.
Good.
Yeah.
Porphyria is a rare hereditary disease in which blood pigment hemoglobin is abnormally metabolized. Porphyrins are excreted in the urine, which becomes dark. Other symptoms include mental disturbances and extreme sensitivity of skin to the light. Vampires. So yeah, excellent movie. I 10 out of 10 would suggest to a friend. Full stop.
Oh yeah, definitely. And
I don't generally go in for period pieces like that. I'm more of like civil American Revolutionary War Ford kind of guy, I guess. But it's a good one.
And I really appreciated the fact that they actually portrayed Queen Charlotte as a German, which you so often don't get in these period pieces. You know, the British king's wife is just kind of depicted as an English woman played by an English actress, but that's often not the case. She was often from a different country entirely, and she would have spoken English with a fairly heavy accent, as Helen Mirren does in this movie. And I appreciated that bit of attention to detail.
Agreed. And I'll admit, I didn't catch the German initially. I thought she was French, but it was just because there was an accent, but it's an accent in English, not an accent in American English. And I might have picked it up if it was an American English accent, but the double layer of accenting actually threw it off. And I thought, because I vaguely remembered that she should have been like Dutch or German or something like that. I didn't think she was French. And I was like, why does she have like a weird French accent? But now thinking on it, it does make sense, because they end up speaking in German at one point in time. And that's where I caught into it.
They do, because he's trying to say stuff without the doctor knowing what he's saying. And here's what this conclusion says. It says, while a definitive diagnosis is impossible without modern forensic testing of the king's remains, the medical community's understanding has shifted dramatically. the once dominant porphyria theory has been largely discredited, with robust evidence now supporting bipolar disorder with complications from dementia and contemporary medical treatments, which included high levels of arsenic. So obviously what they're saying there is whatever he had, the treatments from his highly educated doctors in all likelihood made it worse.
During
Which-
the movie, go ahead.
Which would seem to be supported by the fact that once he got into the other doctor's hand and was taken into the country and not had all those horrible torturous things done to him, then he did recover his wits and was able to reign effectively for a further couple decades.
Which is excellent. There was a mention of his nightly senna in the movie that struck me as odd. It was it was brought to him.
Yes. Oh yeah, where he said I took I
Yeah.
drank 2 cups of it and I shit 14 times.
Right, the purge, right.
Yeah.
I'm
Purgative.
wondering exactly what level of that that reached, because I mean, would they just get him to slug some olive oil? I mean, I don't know.
I'm looking it up right now. All right, here we go. Senna is a natural FDA-approved stimulant laxative used for the short-term treatment of occasional constipation. Its active ingredients, called senicides, irritate the lining of the bowel to increase muscle contractions and fluid secretion, which helps produce a bowel movement.
Ow.
And it is indicated for short-term use only. And it typically works within 6 to 12 hours. And I
Right.
guess if you take 25 times the recommended dose, it makes you shit 14 times if the movie is correct.
Welcome to modern medicine, bro.
Yeah.
Oh my lord, that poor man. But that was after they blistered his back all up with a bunch of hot glass and freaking, which, I mean, at this point you got to wonder, because he had already been tied down by his doctors and burned. So like, it wasn't that much of a stretch for him to be stuck in the timeout chair for a while, right?
And these were the brightest medical minds in the world. And like we were talking about earlier, when in Britain, they still don't call surgeons doctor. They still call them Mr. and Miss, because it used to be thought back in the day, and it would have still been thought during this period, that the real and enlightened, well-educated physician doesn't need to actually examine the patient in order to diagnose and cure diseases. The physician simply relies on his own knowledge and learning to know what is appropriate to do. Whereas a surgeon was considered to be just a barbarian tradesman, barely above a carpenter. If you have to cut into the patient's body to cure his malady, that's barbarity. We don't do that. Physicians don't do that. Scalpels and saws. What the hell are we doing here? That's we can't have that. We won't call you doctor.
They were diagnosing the king without actually looking at him.
Yes. I can't talk to the king if the king hasn't spoken to me. Are you mad, sir?
Right? He has sent no letter. I've no invitation. Oh, they just pitched such a fit. It's so terrible. But still a great movie.
Yep. Just highly recommended. 2 thumbs up. If you're a fan of British acting, you will want to touch yourself while you watch this movie. That's how much British acting there is in this thing.
There is a lot of British acting. Oh my God. And the younger son, when he was in there and he just looked so freaking bored, that was brilliant. I mean, it's only a 10-second scene, but homeboy is like a million miles away.
And it's probably so close to how the actual reality looked. Because, I mean, imagine having to wait around 50 odd years just for your father to die so you can be the king. And especially when you are such a dissipated, wastrel, loser sack of shit that your father, the king, won't even give you anything useful to do in terms of work, which probably just makes your profligacy all that much worse. So it becomes kind of a feedback loop of dissipation, ultimately, which makes you probably an even worse king than you would have been otherwise, which George IV was a pretty god-awful king. I think everybody is united in that opinion.
You know,
But he sure did love women and booze. That's for damn sure. Thanks ever so much for watching tonight, ladies and gentlemen. We sure had fun talking about John Brennan's twitchy face and twitchy hands and pointy finger in people's chests, which somebody should have reached out and broke that finger, I'm telling you, or hit him over the head with that bottle. One or the other. Take your pick, I guess. We will see you next week. We hope you have a delightful tomorrow and an edifying day after that, and a very, very fulfilling rest of your week. We will convene back here next Sunday evening, 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific. Best wishes until then. See you later. Get off my lawn.